I returned home from work earlier than usual that day, hoping to catch a moment of rest. But as I stepped inside and placed my bag on the dining table, faint sounds from my daughter Madiha's room caught my attention. Something about them didn't feel right. Quietly, I walked toward her room, my footsteps cautious, uncertain of what I might find. The door was slightly ajar. She had no reason to expect me home at that hour. Perhaps that's why she felt no need to be alert. But as I leaned forward and gently peered through the opening, the sight that met my eyes left me breathless. I stood frozen. For a long moment, I couldn't comprehend what I was seeing. My daughter, whom I had raised with so much care, whom I believed to be modest and well-guided, was sitting closely with a young man. They were unaware of my presence, completely immersed in one another's company. I could see the boy brush her cheek, his hand lingering longer than it ever should have. My heart sank. It was as if the ground beneath me had disappeared. A storm of emotions erupted within me, shock, confusion, disappointment. I struggled to process the moment. How could the daughter I had devoted my life to, the one I protected so fiercely, be in such a situation under my own roof? Unable to hold back, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The movement startled them both. I reached for Madiha's arm and gently but firmly pulled her up. She stumbled slightly, startled, her expression dazed. Her eyes were red, her face flushed. She looked at me as if trying to make sense of my sudden appearance. "Father, you're home?" she whispered, trembling. I couldn't respond immediately. The sight of my daughter in such a vulnerable state, the presence of a stranger in her room, it all overwhelmed me. Before I could gather my words, the young man rushed out, clearly frightened. Madiha stood silently, then broke into tears. I asked her firmly, "Who was he? And how did he enter this house?" She sobbed and replied, "I don't know him. I truly don't." Her words only deepened my anguish. I wanted to believe her, but my trust had already been shaken. The image I had carried of my daughter all these years was collapsing before me, and I didn't know how to react. With patience, with anger, or with heartbreak. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind refused to find rest, and my body, though weary, remained restless. I lay on my bed with my eyes wide open, each passing second dragging heavily on my heart. The scene I had witnessed kept replaying in my head. My daughter, the tears in her eyes, the disbelief in her voice, and the confusion in mine. I had trusted her. I had poured my life into her upbringing, and yet, something had gone terribly wrong. I had spent my entire career working diligently at a respected multinational company. Financially, I had provided everything for Madiha: comfort, security, education, and all the amenities a young girl could ask for. But in that moment, I questioned everything. Where had I fallen short? How had I failed to notice the shift in her behavior? My chest grew heavy with guilt and anger. I wasn't just her father. I was her only parent. After her mother passed away, I had devoted myself completely to her. Yet now, the very child I protected so fiercely seemed to be slipping away from the path I had laid for her. Her actions pierced me deeply, not just as a father, but as a man trying to preserve dignity in a world that watches and judges too quickly. As the hours passed, I resolved to take control. I would not allow this to repeat. I had to protect her. From outsiders, from poor choices, and even from herself. And so, sometime around 2 a.m, I rose from bed and quietly walked toward her room once again. The door was still locked from the outside. I had locked it myself earlier. I turned the key slowly, not wanting to startle her. Gently, I opened the door and stepped inside. She was asleep, lying diagonally across the bed. Her posture wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of sleep one falls into after deep emotional exhaustion. Her hair was scattered across her face, damp from tears. I knelt beside her and gently brushed the strands away from her forehead. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and her cheeks still carried the redness of pain. Looking at her in that moment, I was struck by how much she resembled her mother. The same delicate features, the same innocence, the same softness. My anger momentarily dissolved into a mix of sorrow and longing. I sat by her side for several minutes, unsure of what to feel: disappointment, protectiveness, or shame. Then quietly I rose and walked out of the room, closing the door behind me. Morning came, but my heart still bore the weight of the previous night. I had barely slept. My thoughts circled the same questions. Was she telling the truth? Had I misunderstood what I saw? I told myself to be patient, to observe, to trust, but verify. Maybe she had made a mistake once, but surely she understood now. I hoped she would stay within the boundaries I had raised her to respect. But hope is a fragile thing. Later that day, I left for work as usual, though my thoughts never left home. I felt unwell, both physically and emotionally. Around midday, my restlessness grew unbearable. My chest tightened with anxiety, and I could no longer sit calmly at my desk. By early afternoon, I informed my colleagues that I needed to leave. I got into my car and drove home, still unsure of what I expected, but certainly not what I saw. As I parked and approached the gate, I noticed something that made my breath catch. There he was, the same boy. The very same one I'd seen in her room just a day earlier, standing at our doorstep. My heart sank. Rage flared up once more. I marched forward, gripped by fury and disbelief. Without a word, I opened the gate, stormed inside, and pulled Madiha by the arm. She gasped and stumbled as I dragged her indoors, her eyes filled with shock and fear. I pushed the door shut and led her to the living room, placing her down onto the sofa more forcefully than I should have. She looked at me, eyes wide, pleading. "Please listen. It's not what you think," she cried, her voice trembling. But I had heard enough. "You think I'm a fool?" I said bitterly. "I trusted you. I even believed your words last night. And today, again the same boy outside our door? Have you no shame?" I slapped her, not out of hatred, but out of complete helplessness. Her sobs filled the room. Still, she insisted. "I didn't invite him. I swear I didn't. He came on his own. For a reason." I stepped forward and placed my hand firmly over her mouth. "Enough," I said coldly. I don't want to hear anything more." Her eyes widened with shock and tears streamed freely as I silenced her cries. I no longer knew what to believe. My trust had been shattered not once, but twice. And with each broken piece, my sense of fatherhood, dignity, and purpose began to crack with it. After silencing her words, I stood there, breathing heavily, my thoughts clouded with fury and disappointment. I could barely recognize the man I had become, overwhelmed by emotions, driven by fear and pride. I had loved my daughter more than anything in the world, but in that moment, love had taken a backseat to wounded honor. I looked at her tearful eyes, her trembling frame. She had tried to speak, to explain, but I had refused to listen. Perhaps I was afraid of hearing something I couldn't accept. Perhaps I believed that control was the only way to preserve dignity. But that day, my version of control turned into something else entirely. Still burning with anger, I led her to her room again. She didn't resist. She followed like someone too hurt to protest. I opened the door, pushed her gently inside, and closed it behind us. The room felt colder than before. I loosened the cuffs of my sleeves, undid the top button of my shirt, not because I wished to hurt her, but because my rage was suffocating me. My thoughts raced wildly. What punishment would be enough? What action could prevent her from ever repeating this again? I looked at her again, seated quietly on the edge of her bed. Her face was flushed from crying, and her gaze was lowered, as if she no longer expected mercy. And then, something changed. As my eyes rested on her face, I saw the reflection of someone I had loved more than anything, her mother. The resemblance was uncanny. The softness of her cheeks, the contour of her eyes, even the curve of her lips. She was, in that moment, Charmine all over again. I had once vowed to protect that face at all costs. Now I stood on the edge of breaking everything sacred I had built around it. A strange stillness filled the room. The weight of my thoughts pushed down on me until I could no longer breathe. I had planned to lock her away, to scare her, to impose a lesson, but something within me pulled back. I stepped away. My hands dropped to my sides. The storm inside me had not passed, but it had changed direction. It was no longer about her mistake. It was about what I was becoming. I left the room in silence. No further words, no more threats, but in my heart, a decision had taken root, one that would alter both of our lives forever. The next morning, I remained quiet, but my mind was anything but calm. I had convinced myself that something needed to be done, something permanent. I could no longer allow uncertainty to haunt my home. If she could not be trusted under my care, then I would find someone who could take responsibility for her, protect her name, and preserve mine. That's when the thought crossed my mind: marriage. But not the kind that comes from love or readiness. This was different. This was about control, about safeguarding reputation. I told myself I was doing the right thing, that a girl of her age, naive, emotional, unguarded, needed boundaries, a structure, a husband. And so I made a decision that would change her life without her consent. I picked up the phone and called someone I had known for years, our office watchman, Fazl Din. A quiet man in his mid-40s, honest and polite, though weighed down by financial burdens and family expectations. He had once shared his struggles with me, how he had been unable to marry due to his responsibilities and limited means. He was surprised to receive my call, more surprised when I asked him to come to my house immediately and to bring a local cleric with him. At first, he hesitated, but I insisted. He agreed, still unaware of my intention. Madiha sat silently when I told her what was about to happen. Her eyes welled with tears, but she didn't argue. She just looked at me, hurt, betrayed, but obedient. Not once did she raise her voice. Not once did she beg. She simply said, "If this will protect your name, then I will not say no." Those words echoed in my heart. I should have stopped right there. I should have seen the weight in her silence. But I didn't. By evening, the ceremony was done. My 16-year-old daughter, whom I had raised with every comfort imaginable, was now the wife of a man nearly 3 times her age. She left my home without a single complaint. No questions, no resistance. Only silence and tearful eyes. I stood there believing I had done the right thing, that I had saved her from further shame, that my honor was now safe. But deep down, something didn't sit right. The house felt empty, colder. And though I told myself she would adjust, a quiet guilt had already begun to gnaw at my soul. I had protected my name, but at what cost? The silence left behind after Madiha's departure echoed in every corner of the house. I had achieved what I believed was necessary, ensured my daughter was no longer a source of disgrace, and in doing so, safeguarded the dignity I had spent a lifetime building. Yet the very walls that once held her laughter now seemed lifeless. The air in the house had changed. It no longer felt like a home. It felt like a shell. I tried to carry on with my routine, waking early, preparing for work, pretending everything was normal. But it wasn't. Every object in the house reminded me of her presence. The books on the shelf, the empty teacup by the window, the scarf she always left draped on the staircase railing. Each memory was now a silent question: had I truly done the right thing? A month passed. Then one afternoon, something unexpected happened. While driving home from the office, I saw a familiar face walking near the market. My heart clenched. It was the same young man I had seen with Madiha. I pulled over instantly, stepped out of the car, and without thinking, grabbed him by the collar. "You again," I said, my voice shaking with restrained rage. "You have some nerve showing your face here." But before I could say more, he pushed my hand away and stepped back. His voice was calm but firm. "Sir, please listen to me. What you believe about your daughter is not true." I stared at him in disbelief. He continued, "I'm not who you think I am. I'm an electrician. That day I was working at the house across the street. I saw your daughter collapse in the garden. She fainted. No one came to help her. I climbed over the wall to assist her and carried her to her room. That's all. I was trying to help." My breath caught. I couldn't speak. He added, "When you entered, I panicked and ran. I returned the next day to explain, but you were furious again. I didn't want to make things worse for her, so I never came back. But I swear to you, I did nothing wrong, and neither did she." His words hit me like a wave. I stood there frozen, gripped by the realization that perhaps I had judged too quickly, that in my obsession with honor, I had silenced the truth, and perhaps silenced my own daughter's innocence. His words echoed in my mind long after he walked away. I remained there, rooted to the ground, the weight of what he had revealed pressing down on me like a mountain. Each detail he had spoken began to connect with the moments I had so coldly ignored: the look in Madiha's eyes, her trembling voice, her attempts to explain, her silence. Suddenly, everything made sense, and none of it favored me. I had not protected my daughter. I had punished her. I had not shielded her from disgrace. I had handed her over to it. With heavy steps, I returned to my car. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. I could not remember the drive to Faisal Din's house. All I knew was that I had to see her, my daughter. I had to look her in the eyes and ask for forgiveness, though I wasn't sure I even deserved it. When I arrived, I found her seated on a woven cot in the small courtyard. She was quietly eating, her demeanor composed. As soon as she saw me, she stood up respectfully and lowered her gaze. The sight of her, so calm, so gracious, struck me in a way I couldn't explain. She looked so much like her mother in that moment, not just in appearance, but in dignity. Despite everything, she showed no anger, no resentment, only quiet restraint. I walked toward her and then, without a word, fell to my knees before her. I couldn't hold back the tears. I took her hands in mine and said the words that had been trapped in my heart. I was wrong. I didn't listen. I didn't believe you. And I made you pay the price for something you never did. Forgive me. She gently helped me to my feet. Her voice was soft. You're my father. I have nothing in my heart against you. Whatever you did, you believed it was right. I offered to take her home, promised to give her the life she had once dreamed of, but she shook her head. I've made peace with what is. Faisal Din is my husband now. He treats me with kindness and respect. I've found contentment here. She meant it. Her eyes told me so. I stood there in silence, knowing that I had lost more than just my daughter's presence. I had lost the chance to do right when it mattered most. I returned home alone that day, but I was not the same man who had left. The house that once felt like a place of safety and pride now seemed to echo with the consequences of my silence. Madiha had forgiven me, but I couldn't forgive myself. Her gentle words, her grace in the face of what I had done, they only deepened the ache in my heart. I wandered from room to room, stopping at the framed photograph of Charmine on the living room wall. Her smile seemed to look right through me. I remembered her strength, her tenderness, and how much she had loved Madiha even before she was born. I had failed them both. I thought of how I used to cradle Madiha in my arms when she was an infant, how her tiny fingers would grasp mine, how her first cries had pulled me out of grief and given me a reason to live again. I had promised to raise her with love, to protect her in place of her mother. And somewhere along the way, I had mistaken control for care, suspicion for strength, and pride for protection. The realization was unbearable. I opened the drawer beside my bed and pulled out the pink baby blanket Charmine had chosen before Madiha's birth. We had spent weeks preparing that room, painting the walls, choosing curtains, placing soft toys beside the crib. I had once looked forward to her future with joy. How did that hope become fear? The answer was painful but clear. I had let the world's gaze matter more than my daughter's truth. I had allowed fear to harden into paranoia, and in trying to shield her from others, I had shut her away from her own life. And worst of all, I had ignored her voice when it mattered the most. No court, no society, no punishment could ever weigh as heavily as what I carried inside me now. From time to time, I still visited her from a distance. I saw her walking with Faisal Din to the market, saw her greeting neighbors with respect, and noticed something I never expected. Happiness. Genuine, peaceful happiness. It humbled me. He may not have had my education, my job, or my resources, but he had something I had lost in my obsession with honor: patience, minimum patience, humility, and the ability to listen. And that, I realized, is what my daughter had needed all along. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself caught in a quiet routine. Wake, work, return home, reflect. My world had slowed, but my thoughts raced endlessly. I often sat on the edge of Madiha's empty bed, staring at the soft pink curtains, the untouched study desk, and the photographs we had taken when she was younger. Her presence lingered in everything, but her laughter was gone. The home was filled with silence now, a silence I had created. There were moments I wished I could go back to the evening when she had cried, begging me to hear her, to believe her. I remembered her pounding on the door I had locked. I remembered her saying again and again, "Please just listen." And I had chosen not to. Why had it been so difficult to trust her? Was it because she was young, because she was a girl, or because somewhere deep inside I had let my own fear of judgment cloud the clarity of a father's love? The man I had become during that time, the father who prioritized his image over his child's voice, was not the man I wanted to be. I had punished her for a crime she never committed. I had mistaken her tears for deceit and her silence for guilt. I thought I was protecting her, but in truth I had protected my pride. One evening, I gathered the courage to visit her once again. Not to bring her back, but to watch from afar. I stood quietly behind a tree across the narrow street. There she was, drawing water from a hand pump, her dupatta draped carefully, her hair tucked neatly beneath it. She smiled softly at a passing child and handed over a cup of water. She looked peaceful, not burdened, not broken, peaceful. Fazl Din stepped out from their small home and joined her. He didn't say much, just carried the bucket she was filling and walked beside her. It was a simple moment, but it revealed everything. There was respect between them, there was acceptance, and in her eyes, there was calm. I realized then that she had found something I never gave her, the freedom to be herself. Perhaps in letting her go, I had finally done one right thing. But the truth remained. I would live forever with the ache of having learned too late. Time moved forward, as it always does, but inside me, something remained still. The guilt never left. It simply became quieter, heavier. I returned to my daily routine, work, meals, sleep. But the rhythm of life had lost its music. Every evening, I found myself sitting in front of Charmine's photograph. Her smile, once a source of peace, now reflected something else. A silent question. Did you protect our daughter, or did you protect your own image? I had spent years shielding Madiha from the world, believing I was safeguarding her. But in doing so, I had never truly seen her. I had never given her the space to grow, to fall, to stand on her own. When she needed understanding, I gave her judgment. When she needed a listener, I gave her silence. And when she needed love, I gave her fear. Today, she lives with a man I had once called unworthy, a man whose life had been shaped by hardship, not privilege. And yet, he turned out to be gentler, more patient, and far more noble than I had ever been in those critical moments. Madiha never held anything against me. That was her strength, and my shame. She moved on with grace while I remained behind with memories of what I destroyed. The rooms in my house are cleaner now, neater, emptier, but no amount of order can hide the fact that I pushed my only daughter into a life she didn't choose, because I never gave her the chance to speak. Now, all I can do is speak to others. To every father who might one day face doubt, listen. To every parent whose child trembles before them with truth, pause before judgment. To every man who confuses control with love, you are not protecting your family when you silence their voice. You are silencing the very bond that makes a family whole. I write this not for sympathy, but as a warning from a man who learned too late. I once believed that honor was something you protected at all costs. But now I understand. True honor lies not in what the world sees, but in how gently you hold the trust placed in your hands. My daughter forgave me. The world didn't know what I had done. But I know. And I carry that knowledge with me like a shadow. If I could go back, I would trade my pride for a moment of patience. I would have listened to her. I would have believed her, and I hope, wherever she is, that she knows that now I finally do.